Everybody, and welcome to another teacher talk session tonight. Tonight we are going to have another educator from different part of the world, and tonight we are going to England, and it's going to be with with the Senior ELT Academic Consultant for National Geographic Learning, Alex Warren. Probably you have known him and you have met him, or you have had a session with him. So when he comes here, we are going to start live session with him. I'm really excited to having him here. So let's start. When he comes, we are going to start our live session. By the way, if you have any questions for him, please write them into the chat box so I can direct your questions to him. I'm waiting for him to join. Invite him one more time. Oh, just a moment. I need to invite him again. I have invited him. Hello.
Yes. Hi. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Vulcan. Lovely to see you.
It's great to see you. Okay, and before starting our live session, I would like to say to accept my invitation for teacher talks. It's really great honor to have you to live session.
Well, it's my pleasure to be invited, quite frankly, Vulcan. You know, I think this is the 115th one, maybe.
114.
114th. So, I
Yeah.
mean, to be chosen is very, very generous and kind of you to have me today.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's really great honor to have you one more time. And I know, Alex, you are very busy, and I don't want to take your time. And if you're ready, we can start our live session. And then start.
Absolutely. Whenever you're ready, I'm
Okay.
ready.
Wonderful. Okay, I know about you, Alex, but maybe our the followers would like to know about you. So can you tell us about yourself, please, and a bit about your experiences too?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, currently I work as a senior academic consultant at National Geographic Learning. But my journey as an English language teacher goes back 20 years. I know I don't look that old, right? But it's kind of it's an interesting story in many ways because at university I didn't study teaching. That wasn't my chosen profession at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually working as a journalist. And before becoming a teacher, but I took a couple of years out to go traveling around the world. And as you do when you're traveling, you meet people from all over the world,
Yeah,
not just in the
sure.
countries that I was visiting, but, let's say I was in Southeast Asia, I was meeting Swedes, Danes, Spanish, Germans, Dutch, and the English was always amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it really kind of humbled me in many ways because while I can speak French and I can speak some Spanish, by no means am I fluent, by no means am I sort of, anywhere near the level that they were. So I think kind of the seeds were sown sort of around that time, but actually the real kind of turning point came for me when I was in Indonesia. I was in Sumatra in a little village in the middle of literally in the middle of the jungle.
Wow.
And I met this guy called Nick, who was an English guy, and he had been working as an English language teacher up in Thailand and was now taking some time out. And it was kind of a busman's holiday for him. He basically was going into schools and
Uh-huh.
offering to teach English classes in tiny little rural places. So where they'd never had an English speaking teacher before. And he was just going in for a day here, a day there, just to teach the children some English because he loved doing it so much.
I
And
see.
so over dinner one evening, he said, "Why don't you come along and join me tomorrow in this school?" And I'm like, "I've never taught before." He goes, "You don't have to teach. You're just going to be my teaching assistant at this time." So we went into this school it was quite a small village school, but there's about 20 children in the class, and off he went, and I was there just supporting, helping him, helping with the children. But their faces, they were so excited. They were so eager to have a couple of English guys teaching them English in their school, in the middle of the jungle in Indonesia. And honestly, it was a magical moment for me, and a real turning point for me, because, I was thinking, what am I going to do when I return to England after my travels? And that kind of set me on my path. So when I returned to the UK, I did my CELTA qualification, got a job straight away working at a school in England. And in all honesty, I'd expected to then do that job in the summer for the UK for 3-4 months and then go off somewhere else to teach Latin America, Central America, wherever. I didn't know at that point. But then I guess another thing kind of happened in that the school I was working, they liked me so much. They said, we want you to stay on. Obviously, I was doing a good job, right? And so I kind of got stuck in the UK and I didn't sort of get to go on their travels. But another kind of part of that story was about 2 months after joining that school, I was asked by the director of studies to do a training session for all of the teachers. And I'm like, but I've only just passed my course 2 months ago. What can I teach all of these teachers who've been here for 10, 15, some even 20 years? And my director of studies, she was great. She said to me, "Don't worry about that, because they've forgotten everything that they learnt on their courses." And, I was incredibly nervous approaching this session for my far more senior colleagues. And I did it, but I was not comfortable at all. But, like with anything, you challenge yourself, you do something, you think, okay, I can do it. And that was my first experience of teacher training, sort of 2 months into the course. And then, 20 years later, here I am doing it as my full-time job. But having done it previously, working as a director of studies, running CPD programs for my staff.
I see.
But the point there is that, it's funny where life leads you.
It's great, but it's really wonderful. I'm sure that you have a incredibly, interesting experience over there after doing that kind of things with them and with the students.
Absolutely. And now I still get to travel for my job, and that's what I love most. I love meeting teachers all around the world, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face. That experience is what I live for. That kind of, for me, that's the classroom experience that you cannot, you can't beat it, because I think for me, it's ensuring, or it's inspiring teachers, new teachers who maybe, well, they're new to the profession, they want ideas, but also, the older teachers, the more experienced one, who may be feeling a little bit jaded, and I'm coming in and I'm reinvigorating them, making them passionate about their teaching once again. And in my current role, I do lots of different things. I do face-to-face trainings in institutes. I do massive global webinars. I do conferences.
Wonderful.
I do a bit of everything, to be honest with you, Vulcan.
And also this one, the Instagram one.
And also,
we are doing this one.
Now, this is my first time on Instagram.
Yes, we are also very lucky. We are lucky to have you here in our Instagram live session. So this is also another experience for all of us.
It is. Well, okay, you're the expert, so.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move to another question. Actually, you talk about your the turning point.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a turning point of Indonesia, but would you like to tell about another turning point? Like, because my next question was going to, like, what was or were your turning point in your own education, actually?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Would you like to say something about it?
Absolutely. And I think, when you sort of end up being a teacher, you always kind of reflect back on your own education and the teachers that influenced you, the ones that inspired you. And I think, you know, we sort of spoke about this question previously, it was like I had to really think about it a little bit, because there are so many sort of, let's say, the mini turning points in my life in regards to sort of my own education. But I think one that I wanted to sort of talk about that was specific to sort of language learning was when I was learning French at school. And in all honesty, I wasn't great. I was okay. And the biggest problem for me though was I was incredibly shy. I know you wouldn't believe it now, right? I was incredibly shy as a child. And I just didn't like speaking in class, in any class, let alone in my French class, because I mean, like many students, you feel that you're going to make mistakes. You feel judged by your peers. But the teacher I had, his name was Mr. Dodds. He showed absolute faith in me, and you know, reassuring me that, you know, I could do it. That, you know, accuracy wasn't the, you know, the be all of end all. He was just so encouraging about just speaking French and learning French. And I think ultimately, while I might not have been great at French ever, the attitude, the positivity from the teacher, and this idea of a growth mindset really struck with me.
See.
And actually, you know, that I took that into other classes as well as into my own teaching. And I think that whole idea of developing students' growth mindset is so important in all aspects of education. You know, that I can't do it. Well, you can't do it yet. And that's kind of such a strong word. And I use that with my kids as well, that if they're struggling with something, I'm like, okay, you might not be able to do it now, but you will be able to do it. You just can't do it at the moment. You can't do it yet. And I think that has really sort of influenced me in anything that I've tried to do in my life. If I've struggled, if it's difficult, I'm like, I don't really want to give up, because I have this thing on my little shoulder saying, you can't do it yet. But hopefully going forward, I will be able to. So I think, you know, that was for me a turning point in many ways. It kind of made me more relaxed, let's say, about
he also kind of he gave you the power of talking in front of the people, kind of something like that. Don't be shy, do it, something like this. Great.
I think so. And you know, I think that's the case with so many students, that they have this absolute sort of fear of standing up in front of a class, speaking their own language, as well as in a foreign language. So I think it's a key skill. You know, oracy is a 21st century skill that all students need to be able to do. They need to be able to collaborate. They need to be able to communicate effectively in groups and discussions, and while presenting on stage as well.
Wonderful. We still have the same, you know, not the problem. When I think of my classes, you know, that sometimes we really face really, you know, the hard times with the students to make them talk, or to make them, you know, to make them to do something in front of the class, because they're really shy.
Absolutely, and that's one of the, you know, there are some questions I get asked more than any others, and that's one of them. I get asked an awful lot wherever I am in the world, and I think there's no sort of singular answer to this question, but I always come back to this idea of it's creating the right environment for the students in the class. It's about creating a supportive, positive, friendly place where, you know, mistakes are tolerated. We're all in it together. And that's really to do with lowering the affective filter, making them, you know, that invisible barrier that's stopping them, you know, expressing themselves, sharing their thoughts and ideas in class. Because once you create that kind of environment where they come into the classroom, they know that they are completely safe, then that takes down the barrier. It hopefully encourages them to be able to participate, to share their views and opinions, and even stand up in front of the class and speak in a foreign language.
It's kind of a safe environment we need to create for them.
Without question, it's so important.
Exactly. By the way, thank you very much, Alex. There was a question, but I will ask that question later, not now. It's about your National Geographic learning. Yeah, but I will ask it later, not now. and start small, grow tall. I think she or he or she, I can't exactly see it, but they asked that question, but I will direct it to you later.
Okay.
Let's move to the next question. I
Yeah.
know that you have, you have a really great experience about teaching, probably, and in your teaching career, you have tried, lots of methods or methodologies or strategies or
Hmm.
techniques in your
Yeah.
classes. So probably you have a philosophy of teaching. So what is it?
Yeah.
What is your philosophy of teaching? It's hard question, I know, but
Well, you say it's a hard question, Vulcan, but actually, for me, it's not so difficult because I have a very clear idea of what I want to achieve in the classroom. And it basically comes from an American poet called Mark Van Doren. And he said this, he said that the art of teaching is the art of facilitating discovery. And this is my philosophy of teaching. This is what I really believe in. I can teach, but that doesn't necessarily mean students are going to learn. So I see myself far more as a guide, as a facilitator in the classrooms,
I see.
helping students to discover
Mm-hmm.
for themselves. So whether it's grammar, whether it's vocabulary, whether it's certain specific skills,
Mm-hmm.
I want them to be sort of in control of their own learning. And I'm just guiding them, I'm shaping them in that way. And that in turn hopefully helps them to become more autonomous, more
I see.
independent as learners, and also more confident in their own abilities.
Mm-hmm. I got
So
it.
yeah, it's about facilitating discovery more than anything else. So, and we talk a lot about that as English language teachers. Guided discovery approach to grammar absolutely is the way forward. Inferring from context with vocabulary, absolutely that's the way forward. So I mean that's the philosophy I try to live by. Even now when I'm teaching with teachers, it's saying, well, what can you discover? What do you know?
I see. That's
And working
important
that as a
point.
base.
Mm-hmm. I see. That's a really important point that you mentioned here about the discovering things. So really great. Thank you.
That's
Thank you for the
okay.
philosophy. Now I can ask you the question. So this is related
Yeah.
with the National Geographic Learning. The question was, what is the story of how you started working at National Geographic?
That's a great question. I mean, I have to say that it was serendipity, let's say. It was a very fortuitous event. So I think what this comes down to ultimately is if you do a good job, luck will find you in one way or another. You make your own luck in many respects. So I've been working as a academic director at a private language school in my hometown of Bournemouth. And unfortunately, for whatever reasons, the school was closing down and I was
Oh,
looking for another job. It was complicated, Vulcan. Building was being sold, relocation. I mean, yeah, that's a whole other story. But the point was, I found myself in a situation where I needed a job, and I was in touch with the representatives who used to come and visit me from the different publishers, so
oh,
Macmillan, OUP, National Geographic Learning, and so forth. And I said, "Do you know of anything?" And as it so happened, there was one rep who I got on really well with, and he goes, "Look, I've heard there's a job going at National Geographic Learning as a teacher trainer. I think you'd be great for it. I know the person who's recruiting. I'll put a good word in for you."
uh-huh.
And that was kind of the beginning of that process. So, I sent in my CV, I had an interview, I had a second interview, I had a third interview.
Wow.
They weren't sure, obviously, at the time. And eventually, yeah, they offered me the job. But like I say, I think that comes very much from, doing a good job and being recognized for that, but also about, it's a bit of a cliche, but it is as much about who you know as what you know in
Yeah,
life.
exactly.
But equally, you make your own luck in many respects.
So they're
And
really
then,
lucky to have you.
well, 7 years later, I'm still going. So yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully they feel the same.
Probably you will have more 7 and 7 years with them also.
Let's hope so.
I can so. Okay, let me ask you another question, which is something related with
Okay.
this National Geographic Learning. What is the best thing about working for National Geographic Learning?
Wow. I mean, I think for me, there's so many sort of English language publishers, but I think it's for National Geographic Learning, it's about having the story. the
Mm-hmm.
brand. It's such a powerful message that National Geographic itself, but also National Geographic Learning bring to the role. And that, you know, I think when you can buy into something and you're really aware of what they're trying to achieve, that in itself makes it a very enjoyable place to work. So, you know, if we go down to basics, I think we're talking about the content. You know,
I see.
all we have to do is show the little, you know, little yellow square, and everyone knows exactly who you are and what you do. You instantly have that recognition of great content, great photos, great stories, great video, and
Yeah.
people think of the TV channels and the magazines. So automatically, you've got all that great content that you can bring into the classroom, which I have to say makes my job really, really easy. And equally, I think for the teachers using the materials as well, because it's real world, it's relevant, it's meaningful to students as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one aspect that I really enjoy, working with great materials. But equally, it's also who you work with as well. So I think I'm very fortunate that I work within a really great team within National Geographic Learning, from the marketing department, the editorial department, and the sales teams as well. Everyone is kind of, it's not like, I mean, it's a big company, but it's not a huge company like Cambridge or Oxford and so forth. So you do feel part of something much, you know, much bigger, and you
Uh-huh.
feel like you're fighting the good fight, let's say.
Nice one.
And you know, yes, we are an English language publisher, and our primary job is, of course, teaching English, but it's all the add-ins as well. It's that idea of being able to bring in the issues of the world. So, you know, we're talking a lot nowadays about this, bringing sustainable development goals into our teaching. So education for sustainable development is a really big current trend in all education at the moment. How are we doing that? And I think at National Geographic Learning, we have a really strong message there. It's not just developing English language skills, it's developing the skills for our students so that they are entering the world ready with the knowledge and the 21st century skills that they need
I
for
see.
success, not just in school or university, but in their careers and life outside of education.
Wonderful. So great. We all know that how great the working with National Geographic Learning from you. Thank you very much. Okay, if they would like to work with National Geographic, you can get some ideas from Alex.
It's right place, right time.
Exactly.
But I honestly, though, I think, you know, it's my first experience of working for a huge multinational company, and I, you know, hand on heart, it's been a really great experience for me.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question is again related with the things that you do in National Geographic Learning.
Yeah.
Like, can you tell us about the support that you provide for the language teacher, especially for language teachers? Like, how do you help them as a trainer, and what do they need most from you and from
Yeah.
National Geographic Learning?
I mean, it's quite a broad question, isn't it? So I think for me, the way that we support teachers is sort of kind of multifaceted, really. It's ensuring, well, for me, I think I want to come from the angle where I want to help them to become better teachers ultimately. Now, that might be through doing webinars, or indeed having chats on Instagram, or, you know, online, you know, a small group kind of workshops, conferences, webinars, blogs, lots of different ways in which we support teachers and they can access National Geographic content. And for us, you know, it's about a partnership, really. It's, yes, we are providing course content, books, etc., but we don't just give them books and say, off you go. It's that support and helping them use those materials to exploit those materials to the best of their abilities. And in part to be able to infuse them, to get them excited about teaching. Like I said, you know, sometimes you do meet teachers who've been teaching for 10, 15, 20 years, they've lost their mojo. It's true. Not all of them, but some have lost their mojo. And you want to help them to rediscover that love of teaching. And I think, I mean, I read quite recently about teachers, actually, from a guy called Zoltan Dornier, who is kind of the lead guy in motivation. And he said that in the classroom, the most powerful motivator is an enthusiastic teacher.
I
If you've
see.
got a great enthusiastic
It's
teacher, that's going to
important, really important.
absolutely it is, because you can imagine if a teacher comes into a classroom full of enthusiasm, energy, positivity, that just rubs off on the students. Whereas if you get one who comes in all moping and grumpy, it's a massive turn off for the students as well. And so that's
Exactly.
sort of one approach that I kind of hopefully bring to teachers to inspire them as much as they might inspire me with ideas and the work that they're doing. And then of course there's many different ways in which we can do that, doing specific training. But actually one thing I like to talk about quite a lot is getting them to be more reflective on their own teaching practices.
I see.
Because if you don't reflect on what you do, you're never going to improve and develop. You've got to think, well, how's this worked? Why didn't it work? Or if it did work, what can I do to make it better? And there's a great quote, I'm not going to quote it verbatim, but from the author Jim Scrivener, who says something along the lines of, if you don't do reflective practice, you might be a teacher for 20 years, but it's more like just 2 years repeated 10 times, right?
I see.
So to keep on top of things, you need to reflect on your practice and your
Exactly.
development. And
I totally agree with you.
And taking control of your own professional development. And there's a big thing now about there's a paper recently by OUP on self-directed professional development, because I guess during COVID teachers were to an extent left to their own devices, and so it became more of a thing. How can I improve myself with my own motivation? And that might be doing an online course through something like through the British Council Teaching English website or through Future-Learn. It might just be watching webinars or reading blogs. There's lots of different ways in which teachers can do it.
I always say it's kind of not, I can't say it's in a motto, but I always say that, like, if you stop the learning, you stop teaching. It's kind of for the teachers, I say.
Absolutely right. I 100% agree with that, Volkan.
Definitely. This is what I'm thinking. Okay, so let's move to another question, Alex. It is related with your presentations, which is when you think about I'm sure that you have lots of and thousands of training sessions and presentations, etc. What was or were the most interesting situation or situations that you faced during that time or times?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you say, there's been quite a few of them, and it's difficult to sort of pick any sort of in particular scenario, because I don't think there's ever been a case where something has gone completely wrong or there's been a completely horrific situation. But I think one that sort of stuck to mind quite recently was I was in Cairo doing the Nile T-Cell conference in January.
Wow.
And it's a conference I've done many times before, and I'm normally in a room that's got maybe 200 or 300 people in. Fine, no problem. So this time though, I'm walking towards the room I'm delivering my session in, and someone comes and catches up with me and says, "Oh, we've changed your room." I'm like, "Okay, that's fine, no problem. Which room am I going to go into?" And they're like, "Oh, we're going to put you into the big auditorium." I'm like, "The big auditorium? You mean the really big one?" I'm like, yeah, the really big one. And it's like 1,500 people capacity.
Wow.
And that's the most I've ever done. So, I'm in there, I walk in, and it's already sort of pretty full from the previous session. I'm just looking up at these, 1,500 people thinking, oh, and having to pivot everything in that respect. And you think, okay, I'm going to be nervous, I'm going to be anxious about that situation. But I think it's sort of testament, I guess, to my development over, 7 years of doing this job. It didn't faze me at all, which was really quite pleasing, to be honest with you. So that's kind of sort of one thing that kind of struck me recently. But the other thing, I guess, would be when everything changed because of COVID. Literally in a week, not even a week, in a day, wasn't it, really?
It's a day, actually. Another week.
Exactly. It was a day, half a day even. It's like everyone's been online and having to pivot everything and having to become an expert on online teaching to help support everybody else. That was really, really challenging. So 2 days later, I was doing webinars, multiple webinars to like 3,000 people. who are
Wow.
absolutely desperate to learn how to teach online, to grapple with the changes. What can they do? How can they interact? How can they, motivate their learners? What tools are there, etc., etc. And that was a really interesting process as well, because everybody was in the same boat, and they were turning to certain
Exactly.
people to help guide them through that. And that was, I mean, a really rewarding experience as well, I think, because everyone was just so grateful for any help at that time.
Uh-huh.
But I
Actually,
think, sorry.
uh-huh. No, no, no. It's okay. It's like a, I can't say like this. We can't say like thanks to the COVID, but it's not a nice thing to say. But because of that, I'm sure that probably a lot of teachers, they had the chance to use the online platforms really, really great. They learned something because of that, if I'm not wrong.
Absolutely. No, you're completely right. And I think there was, I mean, I remember back in my school, we were just starting doing some online learning, and none of the teachers really wanted to do it. They didn't sort of see the worth in it. They didn't think it was something that's going to be a big thing, and they just didn't really show any interest in it. But for their own professional development, COVID was a great thing, because they had to readjust. They couldn't think, oh, it's something I'm not really interested in. They had no choice. They had to sink or swim
Uh-huh.
in that scenario. And I think what it showed is that if you put your mind to it, you can do anything. I
I
think
see.
that's a really strong message. I think, and it's a message we take to students in the classroom. Again, it comes back to the idea I was saying earlier about, I can't do it yet. You can do it, and it's getting over those hurdles. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's true for so many things in life. You can do it. Just having that growth mindset, that
Definitely.
belief in yourself.
Mm-hmm. I see. Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. It's really, really, the great points that you mentioned here about it. Thank you.
That's okay.
And so let's move to another question, if it's okay.
Yeah.
I know that the National Geographic has got lots of digital resources, and other also like Cambridge or
Hmm.
Oxford or others also, they have lots of digital
Yep.
resources. And what are the benefits of digital resources for the students or for the teachers? Can you just tell us something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, digital, I mean, it's become more of a thing, obviously, because of COVID and sort of online learning, but it's not exclusive to online learning. In the classroom, your classroom presentation
Sure.
tools, you can set online homework. I mean, there's so many benefits to it. And I think if we start with sort of the kind of the basic technology of using a classroom presentation tool in class, um, it, for me, it facilitates more what I call heads-up learning, whereby instead of having their heads buried in a book, everyone is looking up at the screen together. It's more of an inclusive environment. But it's also about how you use that classroom presentation tool. Is it just a direct replacement for the course book, or are you modifying it, or are you doing completely new things?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're using any kind of digital technology in the classroom, there's a great kind of model by a guy called Fuentedula called the SAMR model. So SAMR, so
I see.
substitution, augmentation, modification, or redefinition. And I think if a digital tool is just substitution, it's not worth using. It needs to have some kind of extra positive impact
Yeah.
in the classroom. So that's kind of one aspect of digital. Another sort of aspect of digital is the fact that as teachers, what's the one thing all teachers hate doing more than anything else? Marking homework, right? Spending hours marking homework, right? We all hate doing it.
Definitely, I
Um,
totally agree with you. Yeah, it's
exactly.
really hard job to
So
do the marking the homework. Yeah, exactly.
it's just time consuming. You want to be sort of spending time lesson planning and then teaching your classes. So a great aspect of any kind of digital tool is when you have online workbooks, whereby you can assign students work to do online, and it automatically marks it for them. So I mean, these are some things which make teachers' lives easier. And actually, at National Geographic Learning, we have a new platform called Spark, which does all of these things.
Oh,
It allows students to do their online homework. It marks it automatically. It then feeds that into a grade book for the teacher. The teacher can easily sort of analyze how those students are progressing. They can identify areas of weakness and assign
wonderful.
them extra work as needs be. So really, it's helping teachers from that perspective massively. It shouldn't be making lives harder. teachers' lives harder, it should be making them easier. It should facilitate that process. And equally for the students, I think they are the digital generation. They are far more motivated by things when they are in the digital world, on their, accessible on their tablets, on their computers, on their phones, and you kind of, it's easier access. Well, they can do it anywhere, anytime, right? It's far more accessible for them. But also, I think with digital, you get the idea of gamification as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Which again is that motivating factor. Which, okay, we can gamify in a low-tech classroom, but it's easier when we're doing it in a high-tech classroom with different platforms. And there are so many different digital platforms out there that you can supplement your classes with, whether it's Kahoot, whether it's Quizlet, whether it's Padlet, whether it's Socrative. Everyone has their favorite online tool.
Online
or
tools,
digital tool.
exactly. Exactly. I use all. That's also another one. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many of them, and you can't use all of them. Everyone has their favorite, but they just facilitate the processes in the classroom for the teacher, for the students, and it can be really motivating for those kids as well. I speak to so many teachers who use that character of, okay, if we get through the lesson quickly, we'll do a Quizlet game at the end of the lesson, or a Kahoot game.
Wonderful.
And students want that, right? They're motivated by that factor. And so I think it enhances the classroom experience for all those participating in that, to the teachers, the students, and even the schools themselves.
I see. Thank you. And let me ask you another question, which is related with it. As you know that in Chatgpt, there we all know it. This really incredibly, the things Chatgpt. What do you think about it? And what is the effects on language learning?
Yeah, I mean, Chatgpt. I mean, where do we start?
I don't know where do we start, but it's really so popular.
It really has been dominating the airwaves and podcasts and everything for the last 2-3 months since it's been launched, right? I mean, like you say, it's an amazing tool. There's no question about it. But it's also extremely scary about what it can do. And I think from a teaching perspective, I think teachers were initially like shocked and aghast and horrified at this, because all students need to do, they've got an essay to write, a 300-word essay on pros and cons of whatever it might be, and all they have to do is go to ChatGPT, give it the right instructions, and it creates that text for them. How does the teacher know it's real or not real, or created by the students or not? Well, if it's perfect, it's not created by the students, right? But I saw someone recently in Bulgaria, and they were saying that students have got wise to this, and they were like saying, okay, write me a 200-word essay on this, but make sure there are 10 grammatical mistakes in it. And it would do it. So it makes the teacher's job from that perspective incredibly difficult. But equally, if you look at it from a sort of another perspective, from the teacher's perspective of creating materials, I think it can really support teachers as well to create model texts for different writing genres, whether it's a review or a letter of complaint, whatever it might be. They can instantly say, write me a review of this film, 200 words at a B1 level. And you can then use that in class as a good model or a bad model if you wanted to. So essentially you're creating your own content, which as teachers, we've all spent hours and hours and hours creating our own content, right? That's what we do. That's our dedication to our profession. So from that perspective, I think it can be really helpful for teachers. It's just how students are using it as well. That's kind of the balance of the two. And there's a good document that was published by, I think it was by the OECD or maybe UNESCO, on how ChatGPT can be used in the language classroom.
I see. That's really important.
It's a tool that we need to be a little bit careful with, of course.
Of course,
but
definitely.
Equally embrace it.
Yeah, we should be. Really, we should be. Because sometimes actually, when you think about if you like the teacher side and the student side, the students can bring you the perfect assignment or perfect, the let's say writing to you. But if you know your student really well, you can easily understand that, and you can ask your student, "Did you write this?" And then you get the answer, probably no. But at that time, it's not a good thing to use the
No,
ChatGPT for the student
it isn't.
perspective.
But you know, as a teacher, you know your students, you know what they're capable of. I mean, I remember getting pieces of work handed in to me by students, and I read it and thought, there's no way you wrote it. I type in the first sentence to Google, and it just comes up with where it's come from. So it's essentially the same as that, but more advanced, you know, and it comes down to what the teacher knows about the students and what they're capable of. You know, if you're teaching anything below sort of C1 level, there are going to be errors. Without question, and you know that those will be based to an extent on the first language of the student. You know if there's missing art, there's going to be missing articles, there's going to be wrong prepositions. Every nationality has or language has sort of particular errors they constantly make. So as a teacher, you know this, you know what to look out for, and therefore it shouldn't be seen as a threat that some teachers might perceive it to be.
I see. Got it. It's like when you think about this one also, it's sometimes our job maybe is easy. When you think about like the online lessons, when the students ask questions, you can write the questions on ChatGPT, and without answering anything, the ChatGPT can give you like the 10 pages, something like this, or 100 sentences, and you can just copy it and paste it on the chat box, and you can give the answer to the students. And your job can be really easy about it.
Well, exactly, and I think sometimes as teachers we're expected to be the, experts and knowledgeable of everything in the world. But when you're working with, with students, they've got crazy questions that come up to mind, or if you're using content in a book that you may not be the expert in, you're right, ChatGPT can offer you that sort of element of support as well. Or indeed, just Google itself, they've asked this question,
exactly.
I'm not sure, let's go online, let's turn it into an activity ourselves, or let's go online together, let's use our critical thinking skills, which websites should we use, which ones shouldn't we use, to find out this kind of information. And it reminds me of a little research project I read about a few years ago. So there was this teacher who he was teaching American history, and he basically wanted to see how often Wikipedia was updated, or if facts were sort of stolen from it, right? So basically what he did, he went into the different pages on American history on Wikipedia and changed key dates, key names, and key locations. And he waited to see how long it would take for those details to be changed back to the right ones. On average, can you have a guess how long it took for the correct information to be re-put in?
5 seconds.
5 to 10 days.
Oh, sorry. You mean the man? 5 hours. Yeah. Sorry. I got the ChatGPT. Sorry. Yeah, of course, it's 5 to 10 days.
So on Wikipedia.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So basically, in the time that he's changed the information and to like the wrong information before it changed back to the correct information, hundreds of thousands of students would have been onto Wikipedia to get that information, which turns out is wrong because he made it wrong, right? So
definitely,
it's being really aware of where you're getting information and fact checking everything. ChatGPT does not know everything for sure. There will be mistakes because it's drawing on a huge amount of data. So there will be errors in that. So it's just a case of, again, teaching students how to use it. It's developing those critical thinking skills, which are absolutely vital to higher education and beyond.
I see. I got it. Really, it's really, really important point that you mentioned. And there is another question. Our follower that can you use artificial intelligence in large classes? For example, she said 10,000 students to answer in chat. I provide feedback on large classes. Is it possible?
Honestly, I've not taught classes of that size. I guess we're talking about sort of MOOCs here, sort of multi-online environments. I couldn't say either way because you just don't know how that information is being used, and it's such a tricky question to answer. I couldn't give you a right or wrong answer there, I'm afraid.
I see. Okay, no problem. We talk about a lot, I think.
Yes.
So let's move to another question, by the way.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Alex, for the ChatGPT and the talking about. I know that National Geographic, I really love the authentic material that they have because you have incredibly huge, the materials you have, especially most of them, I think, authentic also you have
Yep.
it, especially in your books and the stories and the other things and the things, especially the pictures, the real pictures.
Yep.
I really love them. So, what do you think about the authentic material, using authentic materials in language teaching?
Well, I mean, for me, the classroom should reflect real life.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, the content that we're using in the classroom should be reflective of real life. So it should be meaningful, relevant to our learners, because you don't want to be reading about stories which are just being created for the course book and that have got specific grammar embedded in it because they just want to teach a grammar point. Text should be chosen, in this case, based on the content, and it might have one or two examples of a particular grammar point, but it's not just been written for that grammar point. And that in itself can be incredibly motivating for the learners. It's ensuring that, when they do leave the classroom, they are ready for what the world has got to throw at them. And I'll give you a really good example of this from a listening perspective. So, I mean, it's what I call the real world problem. So we used to have students coming over to the UK and they're like very full of bravado. They think they're much, much better than me. Oh, I'm advanced level. I'm in sort of C1, C2, B2, whatever it might be. And I test them and I put them into a B1 class, let's say. And they're like, they're of course offended by this, but I'm like, okay, look, come and see me in a couple of days' time. Tell me how you feel. Anyway, there's one in particular student I remember who was very, very cross, to put it mildly, with me. I'm like, okay, fine. Let's just see how the week goes, or the next few days. And we'll see if you still think that you are a C1 level student. Anyway, the next day he comes back to me and says, not in as perfect English as this, but he basically said to me, Alex, you're completely right. I was out in the town centre yesterday. I went to some different shops. I went to a restaurant. I went to a bar, and I found it really, really difficult to understand anybody.
Totally.
Why was this?
Good point.
The reason was because back in his own country, he'd been fed on a diet of a neutral RP accent in every course book he'd ever studied from a young age. Therefore, when he came to the UK, he was not prepared for how English is really spoken.
I see.
So, in any sort of multicultural town, you're going to get sort of Indians, Romanians, Poles, people from all over the world speaking with different accents.
Definitely.
And he just had no coping mechanism for this. And so from that perspective, it's so important now that course books do reflect the real world, not just with images, text, whatever, but also from the spoken word. And that's like like you mentioned, that's something we do really well at National Geographic Learning. We've got National Geographic explorers who are from all over the world, from Latin America, from Asia, from Africa, all around Europe. And they're in the book and they're speaking with different accents. Likewise with TED Talks, we have an exclusive deal with TED Talks, use their materials in our books. And again, those speakers, they are from all over the world. And it's authentic spoken English. So getting them to deal with all of those issues of fast speech, for example, as well as accents, all those issues of connected speech, giving them the necessary skills that they need to break it down, top down or bottom, more like bottom up listening skills as opposed to top down, and using those skills to create understanding. So it's not just text, it's not just images, but it's also that listening aspect. And I think bringing that into that real world into the classroom is really useful for the learners as well as being motivating for them. I could open up any book from National Geographic Learning and we go through a unit and you're like, wow, that looks amazing. And you become curious, you become motivated by what you're seing.
Definitely. It makes you motivated. I use the book of spin, if you remember the spin. And right now I think we are using the prospectus.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic book.
That's also really, especially the TED Talks in it. Wow, amazing. The
Yeah,
TED
I
Talks
know.
part,
They
it's
really
really
are.
great. I really love it, especially the TED Talks, the materials, the videos, and the speech over there. It's really authentic. It's really
Exactly.
wonderful.
And within that, actually, within perspective, I'm glad you raised that. There is a little section on understanding authentic speech,
hmm
or authentic listening. And so it builds on those skills. And do you have a favorite TED talk from the book?
Sorry?
Do you have a favorite TED talk that you've seen from perspectives?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the thing is that the questions I really love it, especially the with the TED Talks that we do it. The question part, the
Yeah.
comprehension part. That's really I love it. It's really that
Yeah.
point.
And I think that's a really good point to make as well, because I think sometimes with TED Talks, teachers think, oh, it's just a listening activity. But it's so
Yeah,
much more than that. It's, yes, you've got listening comprehension questions, but it's using as a springboard for further discussion, because these guys, they are discussing real world issues. They're talking a lot about the sort of sustainable development goals,
oh, that's also
and
another
that
part.
is
Exactly.
the real
hmm
world, right? So it creates in itself authentic conversation. It's not a made up role play that you find in many books, role play this situation that you're never going to be in. Let's have a discussion about issues which are outside your front door right now, whether
Exactly.
that's climate change, whether it's plastic pollution, whether it's poverty, gender equality, whatever it might be. Students need to be talking about these issues in not just the English language classroom, all classrooms.
All
That
class.
kind of idea of sustainable
hmm
development should be sort of intertwined to all subjects curriculums.
Exactly. SGD is a really, really important point that, and I'll have it. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. And let's move to another question. By the way, time flies, Just a
It
couple
does. It
questions left.
does.
You really, really, are you enjoying it? I don't know. We are just talking, but I hope you're not
It's
boring about this, what I'm
no. Well,
doing.
I hope I'm not boring you. No,
No,
it's
no,
just
perfect.
like, you know what it's like. It's like having a chat with anybody at a conference. Like I said, I was in Bulgaria at the weekend, and I was just chatting to teachers afterwards, and a lot of the same questions come through. So it's very much
Uh,
replicating that
okay,
scenario.
perfect. It's great to hear that. And let's move to the next question. What do you think? And there are lots of trends in ELT, by the way, and we cannot stop it. There are
Yeah.
lots of things that coming on day by day, and sometimes we cannot follow it. So what about you? What do you think are some of the biggest trends in ELT at the moment? What is your
Okay.
idea?
Well, I mean, like I say, there are many, and there's some which stick around. There's some that sort of fall by the wayside. We've already mentioned the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs.
Yeah.
I think that is a far really important trend that's continuing to happen. The other kind of big thing that I go to conferences and I kind of look at the conference programs, and you kind of try to analyze what are people talking about. And certainly at this year's ITEFL, there's a lot of talks about the Sustainable Development Goals and sustainability in education. But the other one that there's a lot of was about social and emotional learning. That
Yeah,
is,
exactly.
that's a
hmm
massive one right now, and with good reason, because post COVID, there were a lot of issues of students returning to the classrooms, not being able to manage their emotions, not being able to manage the learning environment.
hmm
Um, there's so many things that brought cell. Not that it's a new thing, but it really brought it to the forefront of people's minds and about how they could implement it more in the classroom. Um, so that's a really big one. Another one I think is important is the idea of intercultural communication. So
Interculture, exactly.
yeah,
hmm
because I think there's obviously we talk a lot about how many English speakers there are in the world, and I mean, put it this way, the number of non-native speakers like yourselves completely dwarf native speakers like me. Something like 83% of English users are not native or English native speakers, which means that chances are they're going to be speaking English to people from different countries that aren't from Britain or Australia or America. Therefore, they have to have this awareness of how to work in an intercultural, pluricultural space. And that kind of links to mediation as well, which is another sort of newer trend based on the 2018 CFR companion. And a big part of that is this idea of facilitating facilitating a pluricultural space, knowing how to react, knowing how to behave in an environment where there is someone from Latin America, someone from Africa, Europe, Middle East, Asia, and managing that situation while not offending each other. So intercultural communication skills. What else? We said mediation. The whole idea of English as a lingua franca isn't going away.
Exactly.
I mean, the list goes on and on and on, Vulcan.
There are lots of, exactly. I'm sure that there are lots of lists about it, about trends. I had a kind of a post about the benefits of social and emotional learning that you mentioned here. Like it provides us lots of things about it, like improved academic achievements, like enhanced emotional intelligence, and I think also reduces stress and anxiety, especially with the students, builds positive relationship, and also develops important life skills. And also the last one is fosters like a positive school culture. That's really important. These things that I am
without question, it's so important, and it has, it's not just something to tag on; it's something to integrate into the school curriculums, because it does have, and there's research on this that shows that there's such a positive impact on relationships in the school, relationships between teachers and students and teachers, as well as the first thing you mentioned, increased academic achievement. Because if students are happier, if they're more at ease, and this comes back to what I said earlier about the effective filter, creating that classroom environment that is positive, supportive of one another, it has that important knock-on impact on academic achievement, higher success rates. And that ultimately is what all teachers want, it's what all schools want. And what underpins all of that is this idea of a strong social and emotional learning syllabus.
Definitely. Thank you, Alex. Thank you about it. It's really, the how can I say, broaden topic. It's really, so if we start talking, we can say lots of things about it.
Absolutely. Really, we haven't, talking about social and emotional learning, we can go into the CASEL 5. So, for more information about so that's the organization to go to. The collaboration for social emotional learning, it's like the number one organization that's got all the sort of facts, figures about how to implement it in your schools. So that's the place to go. So really. CASEL, so it's CASEL.org. For those who are interested.
Okay, can you say that again? CEL?
So it's CASEL, CASEL.org.
Okay, I will. Maybe after the session, if you write me that, I can share it.
Indeed.
About that. Maybe if they wonder it, they can go and check the page. Okay, so thank you. Let's move to another question. I really wonder, what are you going to say about my next question? It's really interesting. If you could have one superpower to use in the classroom, what would it be and how would it help?
Wow, that's. I mean, there are so many answers to that question, Vulcan. I think one thing that all teachers struggle with is, especially working in sort of state sectors, is that they have a class and all the students are at different levels. So I think one superpower that I would like, and I think all teachers would like, is for all students to be actually at the same level. So, not having to worry about differentiating the whole time. Instead of having, we will have it. We have students who are, let's say, you are nominal that a B1 class, but some of the students are B2, some of them are B1 plus, some of them are A1. And it makes the teacher's life incredibly difficult. So if we could sort of have that homogeneous level in the classroom, that would be a massive bonus, I think, for teachers. The other, and I think related to that as well, is having that magic button for motivation. Like I said to you earlier, one of the questions I get asked more than any others: how can I motivate my class, specifically teenage classes? And there isn't
really important.
There's no single answer to that question. There's so many ways in which you can do it. But if there was a magic button that you're offering me, then that would be one of them for sure.
The motivation button, exactly, motivates them. I see. And would you do you want to know mine?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Mine is like sometimes I change it, but I always wanted to know it on the reading their minds. That's what I'm asking. That superpower. What are they talking about? What are they thinking about the lesson? Or what did they they get everything that I to teach them in the lesson? Or are they ready for the different the structures or different topics?
Sure.
Something like this.
But I mean, that's a little bit dangerous as well. You might be hearing things that you don't want to hear.
No. The things that I know that's really dangerous, but I don't want to read their minds out of the class. Only during the lesson time. The things that I
I
teach, the things that I learn them. I really don't
sure,
want to hear about it. You know,
but
the things that they talk out of the class.
no. But there's an easy way to do that, Volker. I mean, I'm a big proponent of using sort of reflection in class, using exit tickets. So you can use exit tickets to ask those questions of,
I
what
do.
did you enjoy? What did you exactly right? And that's one way of, it's not reading their minds, but it's finding out how they felt about a lesson. What was your favorite
Uh-huh.
activity in this class? What was your least favorite? What do you think you learned? How's it improved your X grammar or whatever it might be?
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not reading the mind per se, but it's at least getting an insight into their thinking, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's also good. I really love the exit tickets, using them, especially at the end of the lessons. But sometimes, sometimes I missed that exit ticket part at the end of the lesson. But as I said, when they come back in the lesson, the second hour, I ask them another questions. It's like kind of exit ticket, but it's kind of a start ticket.
Yeah, no,
I
absolutely.
I do.
Yeah. You need entry tickets as well. I mean, same thing. So, what do you remember from last lesson, etc. And I think making connections, connections are vital in language learning, generally speaking. Whether it's connecting to each other, connecting to prior learning, connecting to self, but also connecting to previous lessons.
Yeah, exactly.
How does it link? It needs to be seen as a coherent whole. It's not just random things we're teaching them. There's a reason why we're moving from the past simple to the past continuous to the present perfect, whatever it might be. And I think if we sort of let students into that kind of, I know it's not a secret, but into that kind of curriculum aspect of it, then they can see why we're doing things. I mean, often you can see students' faces like, why are we doing this, teacher? And sometimes the teacher may not even know the answer. We're doing it because the book tells us to. But if we can make those connections, I think that can actually serve as a real sort of motivating factor as well.
Exactly. Totally agree with you, Alex. Okay. Thank you. And ready for the last question?
I,
I'm gonna ask you the
I think so.
last
I think
question.
so.
Yeah, I think. Okay then. So, what is your motto?
My motto. I mean, I think we kind of covered this a little bit already. I spoke earlier about my kind of philosophy about teaching, about facilitating discovery,
Yeah,
but it's also that idea of not yet. I think
yeah.
I can't do it yet. It
No,
is just something to live, not just language learning or time in the classroom in school but life itself. I can't do it yet. So that idea of a growth mindset, having belief in yourself that you can achieve things, because
great. Hmm.
as soon as you say somebody can't do it, that's they're just going to switch off, lose all motivation for anything that it is they might be doing. So you need to be able to have that positivity, and that single little word, only 3 letters, but it can be really, really powerful.
Yet.
So not
Exactly.
yet. Yeah,
Not
not
yet.
yet. I
So
can't do
it's
it
always,
yet.
hmm it's kind of a intrinsic motivation also it gives us, huh? Like you said, okay, not yet. I haven't done it yet, but I will. Something like this. You also give,
Exactly.
you
It's kind of,
motivate yourself.
it's not finished. It's not finite in that respect.
Hmm.
There is that opportunity to do it later, to achieve it, at some point going forwards. And I think,
I see.
and for students, that can be a really powerful message.
Definitely. They also need that, okay, take your time. You still have time. You can do it. Not now, but not yet, but you will.
Exactly, Volker.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. That's all my questions, Alex. All by my question by my side. And before ending our live sessions, would you like to add anything else or would you like to say anything else?
I don't think so. It's a lovely experience. Like I say, my first time doing any kind of live interview um, on Instagram. You've been a wonderful host, so thank you for having me once again
You're
to
welcome. It's a
share
great
my
honor to
thoughts,
have
my
you.
experiences. No. It's honestly, the pleasure is all mine. But no, I mean, thank you for all those who've listened in. Hopefully, you've sort of gained some insights, some ideas into sort of English language teaching. And you feel a little bit more inspired going into the classroom the rest of this week and the rest of this academic year.
Sure, I will. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. And Alex Warren was with us, and tonight we teacher talks on the 14th session, and it was really fruitful session with him. And I would like to say one more time, thank you very much for being with us, and especially for your suggestions, for your advice, and the most important thing, your time. You spend your time with us. That was perfect. And we are going to be here next week on the same day at the same time, as you know, that teacher talks every Monday at 9 p.m. And so until the next time, take care of yourselves and take care of yourself, Alex.
Perfect.
And peace and bye bye, everybody.
Yeah.
We will see each other.
Stay safe. Stay
Great day.
well.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Bye.
Güle güle güle. Okay.
Güle güle. Exactly. Wonderful.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.